Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Discovery Season 1 Episode 12, Vaulting Ambition. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Discovery. So I have to start with a spoiler warning. Spoilers, I want to be clear about this. Spoiler warning for Star Trek Discovery up to Episode 12. If you have not seen up to Episode 12, do not watch this video. Go watch it first, then you can come back and watch this video. So, I just want to start with one thing. I want to jump right into this, and I want to be extremely, absolutely, positively clear, and I want to just be clear about this. I was wrong. I was wrong. Sometimes I have predictions, and I make predictions, and this one I was very adamant in previous videos. At the end of the mid-season, some people were saying Lorca was from the Mirror Universe, and I'm like, you are dead wrong. That is definitely not the case. Bleh, not going to happen. Don't even think about it. Now, when we came back for episode 10, I believe it was, or episode 10, I was still like, nah, Lorca's not from the Mirror Universe. But if you see my video from last week, I was starting to crack on it because I did see some more convincing arguments rather than he's an asshole, which to me was not a convincing argument. And so I was starting to crack last week's episode. I said, okay, I still don't think he's from the Mirror Universe, but maybe he is. I was more open to the possibility, and I'll be honest. When I was watching this episode, and there was a reveal that he's from the Mirror Universe, I was kind of expecting it. I was kind of anticipating it. I was hoping that they wouldn't do it, but I wasn't surprised when they did. In fact, every moment we see Lorca, I was like, "Is this going to be when they reveal he's from the Mirror Universe?" And part of the reason for that is because of the after show. Because they did this after Trek show, and last week they said, oh, Jason Isaacs is going to be on. And last week they had the actor who plays Vulk and Ash Tyler. He was on, and of course that was the big reveal that Vulk and Ash Tyler are the same person, so they had to have that actor on. So when they announced, hey, Jason Isaacs who plays Lorca is going to be here, I'm like, I bet you that's because they're going to reveal that Lorca is from the Mirror Universe. Now, ironically, Jason Isaacs actually didn't end up on the after show because he had like some schedule conflicts or whatever, but they had a video he was supposed to be on. Anyway, that did make me wonder, like, if we got through the end of this episode and they didn't reveal he was from the Mirror Universe, then I would say it wasn't going to happen. So to me, it was either this episode or not at all. So when it happened in this episode, I was like, okay, I was kind of expecting that. Now, I want to make one thing very, 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 very clear, is that I don't mind being wrong. And here's the other thing, is like, I want to admit that I'm wrong, because there's so many other YouTube videos that I've seen who make predictions, and when they get something vastly wrong, like, say for example, the Stannis is still alive after season 5. Sorry, spoilers for Game of Thrones, but they say shit like that and they get it definitely wrong. Not a peep, not a fucking peep, when they were proven dead wrong about their predictions. And I always made it clear. I made a point out of when I get a strong prediction I make and I get it dead wrong, I made a point of admitting my failure, of admitting I'm wrong, because we're all just make predictions. We're all sort of bringing. And like I said, I did relax on it last week, but still, I have to admit, I was very adamant before, so I want to be clear, I was wrong about Lorca. Now, that being said, I know some people are going to try to say, well, you don't like the Lorca reveal because you were wrong. It's not. As I said, I'm wrong about a lot of things. And actually, sometimes, especially with Game of Thrones, if you watch my Game of Thrones videos in the past, you might have seen this. Sometimes I get things wrong, and I love it. I love what they did. I was like, I'm so glad to be proven wrong that they actually went in this way. So my feelings on this Lorca reveal is not at all colored by the fact that I was wrong. If anything, the one thing that kind of colors this is part of the reason why I was saying I don't think he's from the Mirror Universe, is because I was hoping that he wasn't from the Mirror Universe, because I didn't like, and when I thought about the implications this had for the story and the character, I didn't necessarily like where it was going. So, the one thing in particular that is kind of making me question this thing is this is the way I feel about a lot of films and shows and everything. Whenever there's a overly, like whenever there's a shocking reveal like this, I always put it under a microscope. It has to all add up and seem to make sense. Like, for example, the whole Tyler and Vogue thing. I think that gels perfectly. In fact, if they didn't do that, I would have been very upset. The Lorca thing, okay, so this actually reminds me of a lot of other movies that are a bit too complex for their own good, a bit too convoluted. Like, for me, one of the worst examples, and I'll get into mild spoilers about Captain America Civil War. I talk about this a lot because for me this is one of the worst examples of a convoluted reveal about a villain that I just did not buy, even though in that movie, like, and I had people argue with me about it, in the movie they did have, if you go back and rewatch the film, you will see a lot of excuses. Like, they were preempting, oh, this is why he did this, and this is why he did that, and he was actually doing that. But the issue I had is not that it doesn't add up. The issue I had is that the plot of the villain was so convoluted and so complex. It's just hard to believe that it actually worked and it follows through. A lot of serendipity has to come in place in the Civil War for like, this had to happen to put him there, and that put him there, and that put him there, so he planned ahead for that. And so it comes off as some sort of omniscient super genius and a lucky bastard as well. And I just don't like convoluted plots like that. I think that ruins the story, and that's why I think Civil War, like, I don't think it's a bad movie, but I don't think it's a particularly good one. Like, I was watching this, top 50 superhero movies of all time. It was like number 5 or something. It was in the top 10. Does not deserve it. 40 at best. I won't even say it deserves to be in the 50, because that reveal is just ruined the entire movie. In fact, it was the only time I've ever seen a movie in the public theater why I cried out around people, because usually I don't like people who talk during movies, and I try to hide my reactions. But there, when they revealed Zemo's plot in the film, I literally in the film went, "Oh, come on, that's so dumb," and I couldn't help it because I just did not buy a single solitary. Even though, like, people say, "Oh, they put in things here," yeah, sure, but it's still a lot of serendipity. It's way too complex and convoluted, I think, is the key word. Now, when it comes to the Lorca thing, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's as bad as the Zemo plot and Civil War. I think few things are, to be frankly honest. The only thing I think is worse is this crappy movie with John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson that came out in like 2001 or something called Basic. If you ever seen that, you know what I'm talking about. That was the most convoluted piece of garbage. And this movie last year I saw, Atomic Blonde, that was pretty damn convoluted too. But Civil War, I guess I have more of an issue with, because it was an otherwise good movie, and so many people are holding up as a great movie when it has this glaring flaw. Now, get back into Lorca. So the Lorca thing, I don't think it's as bad as the Civil War reveal with Zemo. But it's close. It's getting there. There's too much serendipity, too much convolution. Okay, so let's break this down. Apparently, maybe they'll reveal more in the coming episodes. But what we know so far, let's break this down. So, Mirror Universe, Lorca, had led a rebellion. He wants to kill the Emperor so he can take over as Emperor. But his rebellion failed, and Michael Burnham, and it's implied that they actually work together, because Giorgio says this, and so we can sort of inseminate that they work together, but somehow she died. So it's implied that I guess I'll give the show the benefit of the doubt, and maybe this will be revealed later. I'll give the show the benefit of the doubt and say he knew about the spore drive from the mirror Stamoses, because it has been established in this episode there's a spore drive in the mirror universe. Okay, so let's say he learned about that and learned that it has something to do with parallel universes, and we can't, I think it's a fair assumption that he read I think it's foregone conclusion, really, that he read the files on the Defiant. In fact, I think he was the one that redacted them, but I'll get into that later. So anyway, he read the files of Defiant, he heard about this parallel universe, and so he somehow knew about the spore drive. So he went to, somehow, we still don't know, but let's say it doesn't matter. He went to the Prime universe. Somehow, Reddit managed to orchestrate the real Lorca's death, or just somehow take advantage of his death, but somehow he managed to switch, take over, has the Lorca without, and we must assume it's the time when the ship destroyed, because people think that his eyes went dark from the battle, but we learn here that it's really because he's from the mirror universe. So he managed to do that, and then he somehow managed to maneuver himself to be the captain of the ship that had the spore drive that he needed. And so the whole time he's pushing everyone to get the spore drive done, and the whole time he's like fighting the Klingons, he's making friends with Tyler and this other security guard, and the whole time he's like, Klingons, we must beat them. But apparently it's all an act. So he maneuvers to get Burnham on his ship, which is a lot of people saying, oh, this was foreshadowing. Okay, he gets Burnham on the ship so he can use, because his ultimate plan is to use her in the mirror universe to get to Giorgio, because she's the key, and that's on everyone saying, oh, that's why he was so interested in her, because he needs her. Okay, so his plan is to take over. Somehow he actually manages to become captain of one of two spore. How he manages this, I don't know, but let's just give benefit of the doubt. He's a great manipulative guy and manages to manipulate things, becomes discovers captain. Okay, and then he somehow, and again we do see that there was some resistance about the Burnham thing, but he manages to get her on board because he knows he needs her. And then they get into this battle with the Klingons, and then somehow, very coincidentally, serendipity, they need to do like 130 jumps or whatever to defeat the Klingons, so they can get this good picture of them, which of course wears out the drive, and makes it really hard makes it sort of tearing the universe thing or whatever. Okay, and then a lot of people point out, well, he changes the coordinates on the thing so they could go to the mirror universe. So okay, fine. He changed course, they go to the mirror universe. Somehow he knew that Stamets would be incapacitated after this. Like, how did he know that? I mean, maybe they will get, maybe I'm being unfair, and they will get to this in a future episode and explain exactly how Lorca knew Stamets would immediately not be able to use his spore drive and just get him right back. I mean, how he could have known this seems a bit far-fetched to me, but okay, let's say he knew that. So he knew that they would have to go after the Defiant. So he knew that they'd be able to find this ship in the wreckage, which would have the data about the mirror universe. He somehow knew they could get to this without getting destroyed first. He knew that Burnham would find the information that they needed to. He knew that Burnham would stop him from talking to the Shinzo and giving away who he was. He knew that they would be able to get on the Shinzo. He knew that the Emperor would come to them, and he knew that, I don't know. It's too much. I mean, again, I'm not saying, like, maybe there's some of my things that have issues that will be explained more in the future, but still, even if it is, I still think it's, as I said, it's just like Civil War. It's not that the steps aren't believable, it's that it's too convoluted. That there's too many steps, and there's too much serendipity for all these things to just fall into perfect place. Now, but as I said, it's not as bad as Civil War, but still, I'm not very thrilled about. It's just a pet peeve of mine. I don't like when the villain or the character, or whatever, antagonist or whatever you want to call him, has such a convoluted plot that seems pretty far-fetched that everything actually fell into place to work perfectly. And that's exactly what I think of this Mirror Lurkers plan. So it seems like contrived writing. I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to say that. And the other thing is, like I talked before, I don't like what this does for Lorca's character, because I actually, I was watching the After Track show, and the writer of this said, well, people thought, oh, the Lorca isn't acting like a Starfleet captain, and that's because he isn't, because he's from the Mirror Universe. That's less interesting to me, honestly, because I was making the comparisons to, like, Admiral Pressman. And I personally, and because we have seen Starfleet officers act like exactly the way that Lorca was acting in the first half of the season of Discovery, so you can't say, oh, it's because he's a mirror. And they even talked about how Deep Space Nine got away, ironically, from Roddenberry's vision, but Discovery, they're coming back to it. What? No, God damn it. That's dumb. Okay, so anyway, I think it's so much better to think of him as an Admiral Pressman type. That's just a more interesting dynamic, that he's justified to mean Section 31 type of guy. We need to do whatever possible to win the Klingon War. But now we find out he doesn't give a fuck about the Klingon War. It's all just an act, and the whole reason he was acting this way is because he's evil. He's from an evil universe. That is so much less interesting to me. I'm sorry. And to say, like, the fact he had a phaser under his bed and pointed at Cornwell, and he had those scars is from the agonizing booth, like they pointed out. The after show pointed out all these little clues that they dropped along the way. That is so much less interesting than if he actually was suffering from PTSD and it affected his judgment the way that Cornwell did. To me, that is a more dynamic character story than he's evil. But don't get me wrong, though, I didn't completely hate it, and I'm not shitting on the show now. I'm not like, oh, the show sucks, they revealed Lorca from the Mirror Universe, so the show sucks. I'm not saying that. I do think that I am interested to see where the show goes, and I do think they could do some really good things with this, because on the other hand, it does bring up an interesting dynamic of this having someone from the Mirror Universe impersonate someone from Prime Timeline and manipulate them. That sort of changes the whole dynamic in this show, and I do think in a lot of ways what they're doing overall with the Mirror Universe is, in retrospect, making the first half of season 1 better. And in fact, especially in a lot of people's eyes who were complaining about certain things, like people were bitching about the first episode. Why do we need to have a whole 2 episodes of this battle to Klingons? And I think that's becoming more clear, because you need to see Georgiou. You need to, not just in flashbacks, you need the full picture of that to explain what's going on now. So it does, in retrospect, make everything fit into place. And let me be clear about another thing. I'm absolutely certain that they had planned for Lorca to be from the Mirror Universe from day one. I'm not going to say, oh, this doesn't make... They just did this on the fly. It's obvious they didn't do it on the fly. It's obvious that this was their plan all along. In fact, they talked about once in the after show about how they kind of wanted to do the Mirror Universe earlier in the season originally, but they thought they wanted the audience to get used to the characters as is before throwing in their evil counterparts, which I think is actually a very good decision, a very good way to go about it. But looking back on it, it does think like that is their prime motivation for making the show. And I bet you this was in pitch sessions and the writer's room all the time was, we're going to do a show about the Mirror Universe, or at least season 1, because they have stated before that when they first wrote the season, they weren't thinking of future seasons. They left it open for that possibility, but that wasn't on their mind. They were just like, how do we write a complete story? And they were saying that season 1 will tell a complete story. So I do get the idea that that's how they're doing. So when they pitch season 1, now season 2 may have nothing to do with the Mirror Universe, but when they pitched season 1, that was their main focus, and so they had to hide that fact, though, because they wanted to hide that Lorca was from the Mirror Universe. They wanted to hide that the Discovery would go to the Mirror Universe, but the stuff with the Klingons, that was kind of secondary, and I think maybe that's why it wasn't that interesting, and a lot of people didn't like some of these episodes in the first half of the seasons, is because they were just getting, it was all built up to getting used to the characters, so you were more familiar with them by the time they did what they really wanted to do. So I do think that this is their main motivation, is the Mirror Universe and what they're focusing on. Now, getting into this episode in particular, it's not just the Lorca reveal. It's because, as I said, like, I do have issues with it, but I didn't think it didn't ruin the episode for me. But just the overall episode, I would say is probably, it feels more like it belongs in the first half of the season than the second half, if you know what I mean. Even though this is only the third episode in the second half, but those first two were like high quality, like high tension, high stakes, really well done. This to me didn't feel like that. I mean, it was still good. I'm not saying it sucked. It's like a good episode from the first half of the season, not a bad one, but still, it doesn't reach that high level that I feel especially the first, like that first one when we first came back in the second half. Man, that was intense. That blew me away. This one, I don't know. It just seemed to sort of lack something, and it didn't have that intensity to it. And I do think they kind of bumbled. Like, you had a perfect opportunity here with the Giorgio and Mirror Giorgio, Emperor Giorgio, whatever you want to call her, and Burnham. Like, that was really interesting interaction, but they didn't do much with it, in my opinion. Sorry to say. And the stuff with Stamets talking to his mirror stuff, like, that was interesting, but it wasn't. I mean, they didn't seem to do that much with that either. And the thing with Dr. Colbert, because a lot of people were saying, because it was hinted at in the after show and other material that he would make a return again, so people were saying, oh, well, he's not actually dead, they're going to bring him back to life. But I don't think that's the case. I think what they were referring to was this episode where we see him again. But I do think that he is dead and that we will not see him again. After this was just his, spore induced, and it was kind of touching, I will say, to have this send off, and have Stamets talk to him about seeing his death and being able to process, and then being able to say goodbye to each other. So that part, I did kind of like that part of the episode. It was one of the good parts of the episode. I don't know, but the rest of it kind of didn't really do it for me. Now, alright, let's get back to Lorca a bit, because I mentioned this before, is that I think Hallie said, the information they needed about the Defiant was doctored, like it was missing bits. I'm pretty sure he did that. Mirror Lorca did that because his whole plan, again, which is too convoluted, but let's move beyond that. His whole plan was to get them to the Emperor, and so he used the Defiant thing as bait. And it was interesting that when we get there, we do find out it is a red herring, that the Defiant can't get them home. And this is actually something that we all, especially me, should have remembered, that in the episode of Tholian Web, the interphasic space thingy made everyone go insane and kill each other, so they couldn't actually use that to get back to their prime universe. So it does seem like what they are going to use is the spore drive, and it does seem like Stamets is back to himself again, so maybe they'll be in a position to do so next episode, but they'll be missing Key Officer, Burnham, and of course Lorca. But it's interesting to see how they deal with this reveal that it was in fact the Mirror Lorca, and if they just leave him there to die. Interesting. Yeah, so let me talk a bit about the whole Vogue and Lorell and Tyler thing, because I'm still a bit confused about who exactly Tyler is, because it seemed to be implied to me that this is Vogue, who was surgically altered to look like Tyler, and Lorell talks about this a bit in this episode, as they use his organs and stuff, and they sort of fused. Is she saying like they fused their bodies together? Is that what it is? So could could you consider this person Tyler? Because for me, this was Vogue pretending to be Tyler. But it seemed like some people were suggesting, because, you know, Lorell did the thing where she did the Klingon yell, death yell, so it's implying that she killed Vogue, his personality, and so this is going to be Tyler again from now on. Which, I gotta be honest, that would kind of be disappointing if that's the way they're going with this. Besides, like, as I said, I thought this was Vogue, just pretending to look like Tyler, but now it's going to be Tyler. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was like the fusion of both of them, so technically it's both. Or maybe, I don't know. I really don't get it. I don't know. Maybe they'll explain it more. But, yeah, I mean, that wasn't that interesting. And let's talk about, I don't know about the whole eating Kelpy and things. In fact, it took me like a while to catch on to the fact that when Giorgio went to Burnham, was like pointed to, you know, point to which Kelpian do you want, and she pointed to Saru, and we assumed like, oh, she's choosing him for, you know, to be her bodyguard or some, you know, grand thing that's gonna, but it seems like she chose him to be her meal. Of course, she wasn't aware of that, and so when she said they were eating Kelpians, it seems like they were eating Saru, which I don't know. I think that's I don't know. I think that's pushing it a bit with the whole mirror, because we know that they're evil, and as I said, I think like they're not really jiving that well with the fact that there are aliens established to be in the Terran Empire, even though they are subjugated species. They are still, they're not just slaves, they're officers as well, and I talked about this last week. But yeah, so that kind of bothered me. But anyway, so my rating for Star Trek Discovery Season 1, Episode 12, Vaulting Ambition, out of 10 is a 7. Very good. Yeah, it's an interesting episode. That did have some intense interactions between Giorgio and Burnham, even if it wasn't what it could have been. And I did kind of like the reveal of, in the moment, that Lorca, seeing the betrayal on Burnham's face and having to realize that she's been manipulated from the very beginning. So if I look at it at a surface level, it was a very sort of suspense and entertaining reveal, and I like the stuff with, of course, Stamets, you know, getting to say goodbye to his dead lover. That was very touching stuff. So don't get me wrong, it's not a bad episode. So I'll give it a 7 out of 10. But it's really subpar to what the last 2 episodes were. So hopefully they can right the ship, and hopefully they can. I'll have to sort of try to overlook how convoluted the stuff with Lorca is, and hopefully they can do something interesting with it to make this all worthwhile. So I'm still hopeful. The rest of Discovery will be good. So anyway, that is it for my review of Vaulting Ambition. Be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover Star Trek Discovery, and also I do many more videos on many other Star Trek shows. I also cover shows like Game of Thrones, The Expanse, Black Mirror, and more, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.